Welcome everyone to the Top Coordination Show 18th. My name is Luis. I'm known as Maestro in the community. I work with the community team, and today I'm gonna be your moderator in this interview and AMA Ask Me Anything with John Wheeler. We are in the security month. This is how we themed the month of July to create awareness about all things related to security in Topcoder, and there's a reason for this. Um, we have our super guest today, who is John Wheeler, Vice President of Security, who's going to help us enlighten this topic for us. And just as a reminder, this is a AMA format show where there was a form circulating throughout the weeks where you could ask your questions to John. But if you didn't have the chance, there's here a button that says Q&A in the chat if you're on welcome. You can click on there, type your question in there, and I'm going to read those questions and moderate them for John after 20 minutes of the interview. And well, that said, thank you everyone for joining. We have John Wheeler with us today, and I think he's the right person to ask this right off the bat question, John. Why should we concerned about security this month?
Your question got jumbled a little bit, but I think you said, why should we be concerned about security? Is that what you asked?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's a couple of, well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate making time for me and having a focus of this be on security. It's one of those things that if you don't do right, it's what people hear about. It's what I often say is you'll know I've done my job if you don't hear anything about security. But one of the reasons why security is fundamental and important is I'm sure everybody has seen stories on data breaches and the damage that can have not only to companies but also to individuals. Their information can be absconded and used in various ways. In the United States, we have a social security system, and people can go after your social security. They can go after various things if they have your information. So security is one of those components that is just good hygiene, making sure that you're aware of where you're putting information, what information you're putting in there, and how you're managing the life cycle of it. So it's a topic that's obviously core to what I do, but it's something that I try to ensure that we've raised awareness for everybody that's involved in the Topcoder platform, both customers and members.
Yeah, that's very, very loud and clear. Yeah, we have millions of members, individuals who would benefit from being hygienic in the way they use their information. And I guess not just in Topcoder, because there are a lot of platforms and information and data are all over the internet that can be related to and used like maliciously if you're not careful on how you use your information. So yeah, that said, this is the opening. But I'm gonna pause it a little bit just to get to know John a little bit better. I know this question was right off the bat, so let's get to know John a little bit better. So John, can you tell us please where you come from and what is it what you do in Topcoder?
Yeah, I started my journey with Topcoder in 2013. I was working for a consulting company called Aperio that purchased Topcoder in 2013. And at the time I was finishing a project at Aperio, I had been doing Salesforce consulting. And a good friend of mine had moved over to Topcoder and encouraged me to do the same. And so I started working at Topcoder in a consultative role, working with some of our larger customers. Had an opportunity to help those customers learn and adopt crowdsourcing. Had a great opportunity to work on, in my opinion, a once-in-a-lifetime project, which was the Sunshot program, where it really proved the value of crowdsourcing, both to the customer at the time, which was the government, the U.S. government, but also to our members, that we could scale and really leverage the community in a very rapid fashion. Launched dozens and dozens of challenges over a 9 week period. So that really set the hook for me in
Mm,
terms of the power of the crowd and what
mm,
community was able to do. And having that experience was really life changing for me, because it
mm,
made me recognize how impactful having a community really was. After being in consulting for a bit, took on a role a few years ago in security, and this dovetailed well into some of my background in technology as well. Prior to joining Aperio
mm,
and doing Salesforce consulting, I was in a telecommunications. I worked for a telecommunications provider
mm,
in security, and so managed really the perimeter security of that company, and so had a really good understanding of some of the basics of security. Hadn't done cloud security before, hadn't done a platform-based security, but it gave me a good foundation for being able to move into Topcoder's role for security. So, like I said,
mm,
did that a few years ago, and now it's just ensuring that we have the right systems and people and process in place
mm.
to have a secure system and infrastructure for our community and our members.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and also I couldn't avoid, this couldn't I couldn't avoid stuck in this thought in my head about the Sunshot project. I
Yeah,
think I was involved with that somehow. I remember that customer. And what you said, you mentioned about the power of crowdsourcing. I see that you were involved not just in security, but I guess just working with customers and seeing the community producing, I mean, at their best. So this triggers out of curiosity. Now that you mentioned the power of crowdsourcing, what you mentioned, what would you say that like struck you the most, or the thing that you admired the most after your first experience with the community members? What is this impression that you have?
yeah. There's probably a couple that come to mind. I think one thing that really struck me was uh, how much somebody could how quickly somebody could learn a domain they weren't familiar with.
Mm,
When we ran Sunshot, that program for the government, we were dealing with things that, I mean, I wasn't familiar with. That doesn't mean that nobody else was, but I wasn't familiar with. And when we conveyed the requirements, I was like, how are people going to know this stuff? I didn't get how the community was going to be able to engage. And in fact, I would actually argue I was probably almost doubtful that people would be able to get this stuff. And so when I saw how quickly people were able to produce outcomes and build results, I was really blown
Mm,
away by the level of detail that people would go into,
mm,
what they would uncover, the directions they would propose. We'd say we want to go in this direction. They say, you know what, actually, you need to consider this. This is a better option
mm,
based on what little limited time you have or whatever. So it was. I thought of it as an individual, but it was such a collaborative environment that it really struck me of how um, each individual member can contribute different things, and they can also work together to produce an outcome that was really unexpected. And I don't know that I could have imagined going into it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but there were so many ahas for me as I went through that. I to this day, as I try to do an elevator pitch, and I'm not very good at it, but as I tell people about this, it undoubtedly, anybody that I tell about crowdsourcing, they're like, tell me more. How do you do this? How does this work? And I absolutely love that. And that basis has helped me from a security perspective, because I've I've had an opportunity to run large programs, to
Mm,
interact with our members, to understand our customers' expectations. So it's
yeah.
it's really I didn't know it at the time, but it was a great foundation for me to move into this role and
Mm.
really be focused on security.
Yeah, yeah, I understand the picture, and I have to mention that it's not the first time that I hear uh, normally from customers that they are impressed by the level of depth that members can provide to their solutions with their suggestions, like
Yeah,
they're going beyond the scope and trying to offer something that they think will be more helpful, especially with this also this caution that customers have with joining, let's say, trying to develop the products using the crowd, because this is, let's say, not a familiar way to do software, like the typical cascade model. It was you were to a private firm and you had a team working for you. Now you have a bunch of members spread all over the world, and they don't have like some sort of office. There's not this kind of 9 to 5 thing, and this is just not typical. And when you have this a scenario and they say this, you know that some people are going to develop something for you, you get a little bit skeptical, and then there's this surprise. And this is not the first time that I hear that. It makes me think, how could we possibly, I mean, this is not a question for you, this is just me thinking, how could we possibly reduce this friction of it's not the typical kind of work, and how can we get customers involved in a way that they know it's going to be safe.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah.
That's the hardest part is convincing others of the mechanism or method. But once you've done it once, I think one of the moments that I'll remember forever is working with a customer in telecommunications, and having a gentleman. It was myself and this, ironically, the gentleman that brought me to
Oh.
Topcoder,
Mm,
sitting in a room. Kyle Bowerman.
mm,
Myself and Kyle Bowerman were sitting in a room with a gentleman from telecommunications, and he was uh, he had come begrudgingly to this meeting, thinking
mm,
that it was just going to be another vendor talk, and
mm,
that he was going to have to tolerate, putting up with another vendor. And we started to talk through what it would look like. This one person ended up driving, multiple projects through this telecommunication vendor, building out tools and tooling for the DevOps team,
mhm,
and really became a showcase for how we can get started in enterprises. You find that one person that can help educate the rest of. He builds social proof. He builds trust
mm,
within the enterprise because that one person has been able to demonstrate that they can
mm.
leverage the community to be able to get
Yeah,
outcomes that they expect.
yeah,
So it was another crystallizing example for me how the
mm.
community makes a difference.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And as you said, that's the challenge. It's a challenge. Uh, and thinking, and for instance, for me, I normally what I would suggest is just try something small and then
Yeah.
just be blown away, and then you will want to build everything out of that. Yeah. Oh boy, we went on a tangent. I'm so sorry for that to the audience. Uh, yeah, we're going back to the security topic. Hey, Corey, welcome. Hello. Yeah, yeah. Let's go, driving back to the main topic of this month, which is security. Yeah, I would like to step back a little bit and talk about cyber hygiene, something that you mentioned at the beginning. So, what do we understand by that, by cyber hygiene, and why is it something that we should care about?
Yeah, it's probably, I would say that the one of the most important things in cyber hygiene is having good password management. There isn't better alternatives technologically available to us yet, other than passwords. Those things are coming and they're in their infancy, but having
Mm,
good password management is
mm,
really the core of good cyber hygiene, because
mm,
systems and systems access all has to do with credentials, and credentials are your passwords. And so I think the thing that I would recommend most to folks, regardless of their discipline, regardless of what they're doing,
mm,
is adopt and use a password safe. It is, by and large, the most effective way to ensure good password hygiene.
mm.
There's a number of products that are out in this. I'm not going to shill for a specific product, but
Yeah.
having something that can manage passwords for you is the most important aspect of good online hygiene, because if you don't have, if you're using the same password, which hopefully people know
Yeah,
that they shouldn't be using the same password across accounts, or
yeah,
if they're making minor modifications for those, that's a very easy vector for people to exploit and try to gain access to other systems. So it's pretty consistent. One of the data points that I use, Verizon puts out a breach report every
mm,
year, and there's exceptional information in that report. But
mm,
fairly consistently, what it shows and demonstrates is that poor account management, reusing passwords, poor passwords, easily guessed
mm,
passwords, are
mm.
the most surest way to invite a hacker or a breach into your system, because that's if you're trying to get in the system, you try the easy things first, and that's what
Yeah.
people are going to do, is try to leverage passwords to get in. And so the core for good online hygiene is good password management.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned that, um, I'm curious to know what you think about these tools that they are like a one place for all your passwords. Um, this is me talking personally. I've been trying to use one of these, but I'm just kind of a little bit skeptical because I say, well, if they find out the password of this tool, then they know all the passwords of all of the other places where I'm around. So I'm curious to know how to deal with that or what you think about it.
I'm glad you brought that up, because in addition to password management, one of the ways of combating all of these are controls that mitigate risk. So
Mm,
one of the controls that you can put in place to mitigate the risk of having one password get into all of your passwords is to have a second factor on that.
mm,
One of the tools that Topcoder uses that was supplied to all of our Topcoder employees is LastPass.
mm,
LastPass has the ability to have a second factor on that. For me, I personally prefer a hardware key, so I
mm,
use a hardware key
mm.
from a company called YubiKey, but there's several that are
Yeah,
made.
I have one of those two here.
Yeah,
One over
those
here.
are
Yeah.
the most important thing. Along with hygiene is making sure that you have a strategy for loss. And here's
Mm,
what I mean by that. If that YubiKey goes missing, and that's my second factor for my
hmm.
password vault, I can now no longer get into my vault because I don't have
Yeah.
that second factor. So having multiple second factors, for my vault in particular, I have two keys, one in a fire safe, one that's right here, and then I have a second factor in a one-time password vault as well. So
Mm,
I have multiple second factors, but the way of mitigating that, hey, somebody's got my password, they can get in all my passwords, is by having a second factor that ensures that only you have that
yeah.
authorization to get into that vault.
Yeah, especially if it's a physical one. I have this. I also have a USB key too, that I use for some in some products and platforms that allow it. But yeah, I'm going to reconsider the one place, one vault thing. And it's actually also very comfortable. I mean, like you don't have to remember all the passwords, and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and and they create kind of super really hard password to guess. So
Yeah, and,
yeah.
and like I said, having a strategy around that second
Mm,
factor is important. I'll give you an example of why you need to give that some thought. One of the strategies I could use is to have all of my second factors in LastPass, because
mm,
LastPass is again, that's the tool that Topcoder uses. But then if I lose my YubiKey and all my second factors are in there, I don't have access to anything. And so I actually have multiple technologies that manage that. Now, part of that's my role. I have,
mm.
probably 30 or 40 one-time passwords in another tool that manages one-time passwords. But the surest way to ensure that somebody can't get into a system with just your password is by enabling a second factor.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That makes lots of sense. And if it is external, you're mitigating the risk in a better way. Yeah, and yeah, and talking about this, I would like to relate it or to give more context for top coder members and what this means for them. So in the sense of what scenarios you imagine or can you picture of uh, not having a good cyber hygiene, and how could this affect a top coder member in which ways?
Yeah. Um, by not being mindful of passwords and potentially using a password safe, what it potentially has the risk of for members is being able to masquerade as that user. Um, and maybe that doesn't seem that impactful, but if you could masquerade as a user who is a co-pilot, or
Mhm.
masquerade as a user who's a reviewer, you could potentially have direct impact on the outcomes and
Mhm.
the safety of a given challenge. So it has direct impacts on our platform. More importantly, our platform's important as well, but also working with customers. If they aren't mindful of good password hygiene with customers, and
Mhm.
either share credentials or don't have good password hygiene for a customer, then again somebody could uh, potentially get into customer systems or information. So having a good strategy around how to manage systems and systems access through good account management, password hygiene, password rotation is a way of unfortunately enabling
Mhm.
others to
Mhm.
potentially masquerade as you or get into
Mhm.
systems that you've previously been authorized access to.
Yeah, yeah, that could be said that, in other words, like impersonating other folks in the platform, and creating some damage that could be pretty significant, not very good, of course. And yeah, and now that we're talking about this and some of the kind of the questions, and if I can somehow summarize kind of the topic of the questions that we received, and I want to bring that here promptly, um, about the risks of insecurity for top coder members and customers, um, is on the ways how can we prevent them, and what is top coder doing. Because we're talking here about risks of us being mindful about cyber hygiene, uh, but what is top coder doing? What to help us being mindful or protecting from these risks?
Topcoder uses one of the technologies that we use for authorization is called Auth0. Auth0 has we have licensed to technology and employed technology that leverages uh, known account breaches. So if you
Mm.
have an account
Okay.
that has been published as a known account
Mm.
breach, you will get a notification that says
Ah.
your account has been known breached, and the credentials you're using on this account match a known breach, and you need to take action to be able to mitigate that. So that's a technology that we have employed to help uh, really for all of our platform access. Um, there's things that we do from a policy perspective that are just as
Mm.
important, ensuring that we engender trust and have a consistent policy in place. And so our top coder policies cover behavior on the platform and
Mm.
the things that are expected of members.
Mm.
And so making sure that you don't share your credentials, making sure that you don't have easily guessed passwords. So policy is really where things start. Technology is a
Mm.
way of protecting some of the uh, um, uh, promises in that policy so that you can
Mm.
ensure that people that log in are recognized if they have credentials that have been compromised. And then finally, we do have licensing to enable 2FA in the Topcoder platform.
Mm.
And I can't speak to roadmap; it's
Yeah.
not my position, but it is something that I know the platform team is looking at and is looking at trying to deploy 2FA for the Topcoder platform as well.
Wow, this is fantastic, John. I didn't know that we had this mechanism in place, of getting notified if there was a data breach and we were somehow in a position of risk. I'm finding out, and yeah, and also about the policies behaving, because as members, and also I can speak as customers, but I can kind of imagine I mean, this is kind of a layer very deep for us that we don't see. But it's good to
Yeah,
know and find out that there are policies, and these policies are kind of the foundation of the security, and the technology items are kind of mechanism to ensure that these policies are being accomplished. And I guess also you mentioned something about the behavior. I guess there is a code of conduct, and if
correct.
I
Yeah,
did my you see, if I did my job right, I should have brought up this link and shared it with the guys. But I know that there is a code of conduct somewhere. I will find it and I will share it, and that speaks about how members and customers should behave, what is expected in terms of behavior, and there's also this topic of non-disclosure agreement, which bring us to talk about customers as well.
yeah.
Let's say I want to develop a product with Topcoder and I come here, but I know there are a bunch of individuals out there. How can I be sure that some of these guys are not going to steal my idea?
Yeah, so
Or
the NDA covers the relationship between the member and the customer, and
Mhm,
one of the and then there's the member terms that cover the relationship between the member and the platform.
mhm.
And so uh, when you ask the question, how can you be sure that nobody's going to steal my idea? Are you talking from the customer's perspective or from the member's
Yeah,
perspective?
from the customer
Yeah,
perspective. Yeah.
yeah, and that's their primary concern. Our customers almost always ask, "How do I protect my
Mhm,
intellectual property?" And part of the reason why we have some of the administrative controls we have in place, administrative controls refers to our policies, both our member terms and our customer terms, as well as our NDA. But fundamentally, Topcoder functions as an intellectual property broker.
mhm,
Through those policy vehicles, intellectual property is transferred from the member to Topcoder, and then upon payment from Topcoder to the end customer.
mhm,
So part of that is that administrative controls layer. The other piece that's core to our customers, and so that they understand in terms of their ideas, is that, and I know you're familiar with this concept of atomization. Once you
mhm.
break down the problem to a small enough chunk, being able
Yeah.
to understand how that problem fits into the overall scope of whatever the idea is becomes more and more challenging. Again, that's a more of an administrative control we put in place to be able to break the problem down.
Mm,
But the core component of the administrative controls Topcoder has in place is to exchange that intellectual property and ensure that through policy that the member doesn't do anything with that. In fact, one of the things we ask is that they remove any intellectual property after a challenge completes.
man, I'm finding out about a lot of information here. Uh, yeah, but that makes sense, and I think that would solve the concern for if I were a customer and I wanted to develop a product, to make sure that there's not going to be someone out there somehow, stealing my idea. And imagine, like, it could happen. At least I know that there are mechanisms to uh, um, let's say, to punish or to make sure that I get that this doesn't happen. And yeah, and I see we have Pena here who said that, I just read in the chat, we're improving the code of conduct pages this month. That's cool. And please, if you have the link, can you please share it? Help me. And we have Glenn saying that he didn't know there was an actually IP custody chain. That, yeah, me neither, man. This is why we're having this, and it's very educational. And oh, I'm seeing the time, guys, and it's the moment. Even though this is a great conversation, I had some other personal questions for John. I had to jump right now to the AMA section. So the AMA section consists of questions that came through a Google form that I shared throughout the week. I collected a few questions and I curated them for John. I'm gonna read those. But if you didn't have the chance to grab the question through that form because you didn't see it online, or you're just here on welcome, just go through the Q&A button on the right panel here. Click on there, and I will read that question to John for you. Okay. So I'm gonna pull out the questions that we had collected. So the first one is here. It says, "Is my Topcoder account in risk of being hacked, and how?" I think we went a little bit around it, but yeah, John, I'm gonna let you answer the question.
Yeah, I covered some of that.
Yeah.
There's a couple of more technical controls that are in place to help mitigate that.
Mm,
Like I said, we use Auth0 for our authentication provider, and one of the components that Auth0 provides is a brute force attempt. So if somebody, if maybe you do have weak credentials and somebody's trying to guess them, it will terminate that brute force attempt after a certain number of tries.
mm,
Like I said, that's in addition to
mm,
if there is a known data breach. Auth0 subscribes to a data set that has that known data breach, and they can compare who's logging in and
mhm,
say, hey, this user has a known data breach. We
mhm,
need to notify them that they need to change their credentials and prevent you from logging the platform. So those are two technical controls that we have. In addition to that, we collect the data from all of the authorizations that happen, and we have the ability to monitor when we see things that are anomalous. So IP address is recorded, obviously the user login and what application they're going to. So if anomalous behavior is detected, that can also be something that would trigger a change in their account status from potentially being revoked. So those are some of the technical controls that we have in place to be
mm.
able to reduce the risk of somebody breaking into somebody else's account.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, John. And just to follow up a little bit, I think the answer to that question is the answer to the question of any platform out there. Is my account in risk of being hacked? Of course, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but the thing is that what mechanism we have in place to avoid that.
yeah.
Yeah, and I learned today that we have a few good ones. Thank you, John. Let's go to the next question. Um, it says, "Will there ever be competitions for crackers?" And I guess about by crackers they mean people who break stuff.
Yeah, there's some very compelling businesses that are in this right now.
Mm,
Actually, Topcoder is a customer of one of them.
mm,
Topcoder uses a company called HackerOne.
mm,
HackerOne they specifically curate crowds that focus on what I'd refer to as red team folks that look to break into systems.
mm.
And
Wow.
so that community is dedicated, just as Topcoder is, to the education, cultivation, integration
Mm,
of leveraging that community with customers. And so Topcoder is a customer of this. I do believe it's something that I'm personally interested in.
mm,
I do believe it's something that we could use. It's not clear to me if the best strategy is partnership or if it's building a community. The folks that are here that are on this call and hopefully that
mm,
listen to this and your experience, it's really hard to build community. It
mm,
takes, there has to be an impetus for people to want to join and participate in
mhm,
that. I've been truly blessed to have found Topcoder and found a community that it was started before I got here, and people have done a great job of developing that community. But it's hard to start a community, and so because there's a couple of competitors in this space, I think it'd be hard to start. I think a partnership may make sense, and I think that there's opportunity for communities to use communities. And what I
mm.
mean by that is there may be an opportunity for a Topcoder community to leverage another community that's around that
Yeah.
to further build out capabilities that couldn't be done in just this community alone. I don't know that I don't know that there's one community that's going to solve them all, but I do
Mm.
like the idea of community using community.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting concept as an strategy to build, to gather like-minded folks around this topic and just creating something out of it. And since we have consider it considerably large number of members and interest around this
Yeah.
topic, it would be something cool to try out. And yeah, and I know that there's a few folks here on this call quite interested on this topic,
Yeah.
and I hope this answer was helpful. So let's go to the next question that we have here. It it is been it says, I've been competing for a long time, and this hypothetical situation has always bugged me. How can I truly know that my competitors, in quotes, competitors, are indeed individuals and not companies? Oh yeah, I know where this comes
Yeah.
from, and it's a good one.
Yeah.
Mm,
I there's one thing that differentiates Topcoder um, from other delivery mechanisms, other ways of achieving an outcome. Um, and I often talk about this with customers when I have an opportunity. When we talk about the challenge model and being able to get an outcome through a challenge, the real differentiator is the human component of that.
mm,
It's I've been proven over and over again that having a human verify
mm,
is paramount in understanding, um, uh, not only the efficacy of the code to be able to solve the original problem, but the capabilities of the underlying developer, the reviewer can glean. And so this question is, how do I know that that person's there? And I think the thing that really prevents that is the community itself. We've had scenarios in the past where community members have said, "Hey, that's not right. That doesn't. Something's not right about
mm,
that. Can you look into that?" And
mm,
oftentimes there's data that proves their assertion.
mm,
Somebody's logging in from two different IP addresses that are not even anywhere near each other, or they have different coding. But there's other data that proves that there was something that wasn't right. But the
mm,
most important thing was actually the members that were able to determine some of these things, and it's based on their own interactions with something. So I think it's a fair concern, and there's no control that's in place that can completely eliminate the possibility of companies doing it. But there's a number of mitigating factors. Community, I think, is one. The other
mm,
one is I think that it's possible that even if people could participate, the their return on their time wouldn't be worth it to them. The value of the prize is geared for an individual. And
mm,
I think, finally, um, uh, with the community kind of policing and the value, the final thing that what motivates people to participate in these things is the notoriety. And so if
mm,
you have one person that's participating in it, they're the clear winner. They're the one that's going to celebrate. Maybe they'll because if it's competitions is public, they'll be able to celebrate and say, "Hey, I won this thing," or have notoriety. It'll be part of their profile. They'll be able to demonstrate that they have this. If it's multiple individuals, I struggle to see how they're going to. Who's going to get credit for that? Because I think
yeah.
that if they're competing in that way, they may argue over who's going to get responsibility, accountability for that.
Yeah.
But I think that, like I said, the most important thing is really that community is the one that helps us better understand if there's, in addition to some of the technical controls we have in place, but helps us better understand if there's some nefarious behavior that's going on.
Yeah, yeah. This is a whole topic, and I'm glad this question was brought up. And just to provide me a little bit more of context to all guys in there, it's related mostly to the challenges, competitions. As you know, we members we can participate as individuals, and the concern here is about, let's say, finding, let's say, a country that has some kind of economical situation that benefits from having a bunch of people as a company competing in challenges. So this would translate as someone, an individual account, being able to submit to, I don't know, let's say 10 challenges in 5 days. which is not humanly possible.
Yeah.
And the question is related to that, like if this person is concerned about this situation and the mechanism in place right now. And this happens. I think I remember once, and it's true what John says. The community itself was the one who brought up the topic, the concern, and then it was verified that yes, this was a odd situation. It was means that someone or was logging in from different IP addresses, and yeah, community itself can voice out concerns about odd behaviors if they happen. I mean, I myself I've witnessed this thing only once, and 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 yeah, it was solved this situation. Yeah, but it has to be like certain conditions, as John is mentioning. Like there has to be economical conditions for this to be beneficial for this company to do that, and also accountability of reward and gratification and recognition. It has to be to someone. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but eventually these malicious things, I don't think they last. Eventually they will be found out or something.
I think the thing, like I said, that's it reinforces my belief in community being one of the best technologies is that, like I said, community typically finds these things. There's
Mhm.
lots of technology out there. There's AI and machine learning that can predict this stuff, but there's still nothing better than a human being able to say that
Mhm.
doesn't look right. And
Yeah.
having the largest community, development community, in the world is what differentiates us being able to reduce that risk because so many people participate. They're like, I don't know who that, and I think that's the other thing. When you have community, people tend to kind of want to know who that person is, and so
Hmm.
by
Yeah.
virtue of somebody saying
Hmm.
I'm a competitor in this, if you go to any profile, not only is Topcoder social proof of that person's profile, but they often will exist in other domains as well. You'll see GitHub, if it's a
Hmm.
developer. You'll see Dribble if they're a designer. You'll see other elements that prove that person's there. So
Hmm.
it makes it. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it just really reduces the risk of having that type of exploit because people want to be able to display that they have those skills and abilities, and that's part of what Topcoder provides.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I have seen some work around the profile pages recently, um, of skills verification, and it's a pretty neat system, sophisticated, because one thing is saying that you know something, right? But another thing is having data proving and validating that you actually competed at something, won something, and there's the validation that you actually have skills, enough skills to win
Yeah.
certain type of competition. And this is something that Top Color is pulling off real nice. There's a new Top Color profile page. If you haven't guys checked it out, I suggest you to go right away and go see the new profile pages. And that you can write down, let's say, in your LinkedIn profile, I know this, I know that, I know the CSS, I know JavaScript. But then in top color, you have a verified item or badge if you actually won a competition or participated in something related to that technology and successfully accomplished. So that's a validation of your knowledge, right there, like of your knowledge and experience. And yeah, sorry to steal your thunder a little bit. Just
No, no, that's a, what you're saying is exactly the proof points that I go through with customers is that members want to be able to demonstrate and show that they have proficiency and skills and ability. And so it like I said, it doesn't eliminate it, but it drastically reduces this
Yeah.
some of these edge cases that can happen, but they're very rare, and
Yeah.
it's easier for other members to detect because they'll look at a profile page, say, this guy just won 5 contests and he's got no skills. How is that
Yeah.
possible?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so maybe AI can pick that stuff up, but humans are better at it right now, and I'm going to rely on the community to do that.
Yeah. Perfect. And something else, I mean, a follow up question to that, so that you're related in security, you could possibly know better than me. And we're doing something right now to verify um, members' identities somehow. I know, some places they ask, like, I don't know, a build, a picture of your bills, any of your bills like gas, electricity, or something.
Yeah.
Do we have something in place for that?
Yeah, we do member verification for all winners and all TAS members. We use a third-party vendor that does
Mm,
document verification. This third-party vendor has agreements with multiple global companies to
mm,
verify documents across really every country that Topcoder has members in. And it's a there's a NIST standard that I'm becoming more familiar with that describes the level of verification, but I believe it's AAL2. And what that means is that uh, uh, you've provided a document or something that signifies who you are in your wherever whatever country you live in. It could be a passport, it could be a government ID, it could be something that's provable, and then this provider has a database or a service with that country that can verify the authenticity of that document.
mm,
And now, in addition to verifying that document, you also take a selfie, and that selfie
mm-hmm.
has to mirror what's on the document. So if
In the
there's a
document, yeah.
mismatch between those two things, we'll know that that's not the person who represented that identity. And so that's one mechanism. We're looking at things that enable that in a more ad hoc and even potentially real time basis, so that that can remove the this guy interviewed and this guy showed up problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's not just Topcoder facing. Everybody that has any type of um, additional staffing is faced with that same thing. And so we're looking at technologies that mitigate or reduce the risk of having somebody pose for somebody else, because
Yeah.
obviously I could show my ID and show my information and then log in as your account if you gave me credentials as an example.
Yeah.
So those are the types of things we're looking at trying to mitigate that risk as well. But again, I go back to why the community is driven to and drawn to Topcoder, and it's and it the one of the paramount reasons is to be able to um, uh, first find community, but able to demonstrate the skills and abilities that they have. And so,
Mm-hmm.
if you're masquerading as somebody else, then it muddies that a little bit and doesn't provide them really the what they want, which is to be able to show that they can do that as themselves. They're
Yeah.
masquerading as somebody else. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. And I have a closing question that I will
yeah,
ask you at the end of the rest that we have. We had three more. But yeah, it's related to this. I will bring it up after that. So yeah,
yeah.
let's jump to the next question. It says, should we be worried of our cash in packs? This refers to the payments page from external threats.
No, I don't think there's anything that's specific to PAX that uh, the platform and PAX has access to the accounting that's underneath, but ultimately that's driven by accounts that aren't directly tied into Topcoder. So those are uh, registers that manage the information, but they ultimately interact with systems, banks that move that money around. And so I think the risk is low of something happening in PAX itself. PAX is one of our legacy systems, but it's been functioning quite well for some time. There were some changes that were made about 3 years ago in terms of your ability to manage where PAX funds could go.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that system in itself has any uh, explicit risk that would cause anybody concern.
Yeah, yeah, good to know that. I hope that solves your doubt. To whomever asked this question, it was anonymous. We have another one. It's from Pena. Pena is here helping. By the way, Pena, thank you for sharing the link of the code of conduct and making my job right. Thank you very much. There's a question, two questions from Pena. First one is, Has Topcoder ever suffered from a major breach?
Uh, there was about 12 years ago now, there was data that was absconded. I think it was submissions. I didn't
Mm,
know this, but there was a finding. So our parent company, Wipro, sent me something. I want to say a year ago that there
mm,
was submissions that were out on the internet, and this was a breach that happened. I want to say 10 or 12 years ago, where the submissions were absconded from where they were stored and were
mm,
provided. Notification was done for that back then, but that's been some time. I'm not aware of a breach since then.
mm. Yeah, interesting. Um, let's go to the last question from the Q&A panel. It's also from Pena. He asks, will Topcoder offer security services to clients at any point in the future?
Um, I guess I'd want to know what security services means. Um, uh, if this is related to the other question about having cracker
Mm-hmm.
competitions, again, I think that's a possibility. I don't know if the best
Yeah.
strategy is to partner or to build our
Mm-hmm.
own. It really comes down to an economics. Here's what I do think. What I'd like is for Topcoder to be a place where members could come and customers could come to solve all of those problems. So whether or not that's an offering or a product that Topcoder has, or we've reduced the friction to the point where you could come to Topcoder, run a software challenge, and then quickly run a pen test on a company like BugCrowd or HackerOne,
Mm-hmm.
get the results back, and then mitigate those results within Topcoder itself. I think that type of inner crowd capability would be I don't need to have the crowd. I think being able to integrate those crowds is probably one of the most important things. I think BugCrowd and HackerOne do an exceptional job of
Mm.
managing their crowds. I think Topcoder does an exceptional
Yeah.
job of managing our crowd. And I
Mm.
think that that's one of the core reasons why we have the crowd we have. I think being able to interconnect those two things, whatever that looks like, I think is probably the most optimal way of getting the best out of those two crowds.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to strategize it. And I hope that answers the question, Pena. So yeah, that's it for all of our audience questions. Well, there's one here from Vanita in the chat that said, "Why would someone post or do another person's work and let that person get paid when they can do the work under their own name and get paid?" Well, Vanita, I can tell you that I don't know. Maybe it's not in the stage of working for others, just extracting the money out of them. I guess that's the scenario that we were trying to pose here. So yeah, the closing question that I mentioned, John, to before we wrap this up, it was about validating the individual's credentials, skills, and proficiency at solving problems. And it's a question that I should have started with, because we were describing the how to do this, how to avoid, how to prevent, but we should have started with the why, the reason why this is important. I mean, I'm talking about having
Mm,
individuals verified. I'm going through this process, know your customer, KYC process, which could be, let's say, it could be, I don't know, this is annoying, this is boring. Like, I don't want to I don't want to go through this process and show my identity and stuff. There could be some people, who could, maybe they don't like to reveal this. So there should be, I guess, a reason or a benefit for them. So this is kind of my questions for you. So what is the benefit for them? Why should we do the verification process?
yeah. It's a great question. One of the fundamental things new customers come to Topcoder with in terms of questions is how do I trust the community?
Mm,
And if if you think about relationships that you have or trust in general and how do you build trust, one thing is being able to know who you talk to. We started this process getting
mm,
to know me better, right? Helping to understand how I got here and why. So
mhm,
the goal of that is to engender some trust in who you're
mm,
working with. And identity verification is one way of engendering that trust.
Mm,
If you don't know who you're working with, it makes it more difficult to trust who that person is.
mm,
And so by Topcoder taking on the role and responsibility of a middleman and saying
mm,
we're going to know who our community is and ensure that the community that works with you is somebody that we can identify. Now that still may mean that the end customer doesn't know your first and last name and your address, but Topcoder does. We know who
mm,
you are, we know who we're
mm,
working with, and we want to ensure that as customers work with us, that we can ensure that they have the same level of trust in potentially a very short period of time that they know us, that we've built over a long period of time with that community. And so
mm,
identity verification is one way of building that trust and ensuring that customers come to us and they can trust that community right off the
mhm.
get-go.
Yeah, I get it. And that translates as, of course, trust, work for everyone, and it's a kind of the missing human nature element of a solid handshake. This is how you know that
Yeah,
you're talking to someone.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Agreed,
totally get it.
agreed.
Thank you for the clarification. Well, that said, these were all the questions. It was a great interview, John. It was very educational. I learned, at least me personally, I learned a bunch of things about security, about Topcoder, and about identity verification. Thank you again for your time. I know you took time out of your agenda for this. Totally appreciate it. And to all of our audience or live audience here, thank you for coming and taking time out of your agendas to join us. I know for some of you it's night. Pen, I know it's night for you evening time. People for you too. And that's it. That's all for me. Thank you again. And John, if you want to say something before we leave, the stage is all yours.
Just really appreciate you setting us up and how well it was orchestrated, and really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. And hopefully, people got something out of this.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure we did. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, evening, and see you again in another show. Bye bye.
Take care.